Hey friend, welcome back to the Care Collective podcast, a space for caregivers to feel seen, supported, and a little less alone in all that they carry. Here we honestly talk about the emotional, mental, and practical sides of caregiving, whether you're caring for an aging parent, supporting someone through illness, or simply trying to hold a lot for the people you love. This podcast is here to remind you that your experience matters too. My hope is that each episode gives you a mix of comfort, perspective, and real tools you can take with you. Today's conversation is with Dr. Christine Powell, an education therapist and executive functioning coach who helps people better understand how the brain works, especially when it comes to stress, memory, planning, and decision making. Along with her professional expertise, she also brings personal experience as she and her family navigate supporting her aging father. In this episode, we'll talk about what caregiving stress can actually do to the brain, why caregivers often feel mentally overloaded and emotionally drained, and how understanding executive functioning can help us approach both ourselves and our loved ones with more compassion. Dr. Powell also shares practical strategies for reducing overwhelm or supporting autonomy and creating systems that make caregiving feel a little more manageable. So if you've ever found yourself feeling forgetful, stretched thin, exhausted, or just frustrated by how much caregiving asks of your mind and your heart, I think this episode will really speak to you. So let's get into my conversation with Dr. Christine Powell. Welcome to the podcast, and we'll just start off by having you just introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background.
Sure. First of all, thank you for your time and energy. This is awesome to connect with other people kind of interested in just caring for others, right? My name is Dr. Christine Powell. I'm an education therapist, and I help brains. That's kind of what I do. That's my background. Yeah. And when we look at taking care of others, it really has a lot to do with brain science without actually knowing that. Our heart feels like it's very heavy when we take care of somebody else, but we need to really think about our brains as well. Although my major wheelhouse is in ADHD and unique learning profiles. Sure. I think that we all come to the care community with a different set of skills and unique brains. So that's why I reached out to you and to discuss it, because I love collaborating with individuals that are kind of in the same village.
Right. Well, and I know you mentioned to me in particular that you kind of have a personal motivation or care story as well too. So would definitely love to hear kind of a little bit more about, even personally, how care kind of affects your life.
Well, that's why I reached out. My dad will be 90 in March, and my family has been going through the stages, I think, of grief, right? We're watching our patriarch of the family age, and he needs more and more help. And the stalwart of our family is now relying on his children and his grandchildren and his village to take care of him without even asking, right? He doesn't think he needs the help. But we all recognize that it's inevitable that he does need our.
Right. No, and I think it is, what I hear so often from caregivers especially is just that grief side of it and having to let go of things. And I know a lot of our early conversation was kind of centered on how much of your work has kind of even helped you understand what's going on in the mind and helped give more grace or understanding, surrounding these situations that you have been in. So can you kind of take us through at a high level what kind of things you have learned about the brain and how that has been able to help you?
Sure. As an executive functioning coach and with a neurobiology background, when I explain it to parents or explain it to students, I talk about the prefrontal cortex, that's the very front of our brain. It's the last to develop, but it's one of the first things that we see, or the executive functions, are the first things we see degenerate in older adults. And subsequently, I call it the air traffic controller of the brain, or the CEO. So when I'm talking to students about their air traffic controller, that's really the hub of where everything happens in your body. That's where we critically think. That's where we make our decisions. That's the way we plan. We organize. We are able to have our response inhibition, not respond. And when we get older or are medically fragile or something happens neurologically, that air traffic controller really takes a hit. So think about it when my dad is at this point.
Yeah.
Very soon. I kind of liken it to there's glitches, right, in his control panel of his air traffic controllers. It's understaffed, right? He doesn't have enough going on right there. The radar is glitching and the planes are circling dangerously at times. Yeah. So let's kind of put it into a metaphor.
Right. Well, and I know you said that you use that as well, even to kind of explain things to him. And I think that was one story that I'd love to be able to highlight, for caregivers, because I think it can be difficult sometimes because obviously, like you said, your brain is operating on a different capacity and understanding than the person you're caring for's brain. And so while you have the understanding and can see everything and, understand what's going on, helping that person let go of things, change what's comfortable. I think this even applies to the children that you're talking about and being able to help them if they learn differently, or, these educators, these teachers are sitting here, they understand perfectly what they need them to do, but there's just that gap there, and trying to bridge that gap between the care recipient, right, in any setting. And so I like the example that you brought up, is to use analogies that they are familiar with and kind of put it into their own world and things that they can understand. And so, the example you brought up specifically was being able to tell your dad, pilots have a checklist, so let's give you a checklist too of things, and that's okay, right?
That's kind of externalizing. That's one of the strategies I would propose to give to care providers when they're working with individuals that need their support and help. When we externalize what we're thinking about, that long list of to-dos, just for our sake, right, as care providers, to be able to get that in a concrete fashion. We have so much going on in our brain. Typically, anybody can remember about 7 or 8 items at one time. Now, we're not just responsible for taking care of ourselves or maybe taking care of children or our household, but we're also maybe take on the loving task of taking care of somebody else as well. So externalizing that and creating lists for ourselves and a checklist, a concrete checklist. And I think I mentioned to you, Mikayla, was the fact that my father, retired military colonel, right, in the Marines. I don't need this. What are you talking about? I'm like, Dad, everybody needs a checklist. Even pilots need a checklist before, they take off, just to make sure they have everything looked at, they've gone over it. So, and that kind of it reframed it a little bit, going, you're absolutely right. So he was more, I guess, able to accept the fact that may be a really good strategy, because it's not just the fact that, his memory may be deteriorating, but it's a double kind of reinforcement that individuals that we hope are the most cognitively aware, pilots, right, are checking.
Right, because it's that in cases like your brain needs reminders too. Like, it should not be expected to act perfectly. I mean, even athletes, we just got done with the Winter Olympics. The amount of hours they spend in practice. You don't just do it once, hit a hole in one and you're like, okay, I don't need to do any of that anymore. It's that practice over time. So learning to treat your brain in that same capacity, or your mental capacity as well, I think is really important.
Yes, that muscle memory, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I would love to kind of speak and talk for a second about the caregiver experience in particular, because I think you brought up an interesting point about, your brain is also overwhelmed and under stress. And I know I have talked to several trauma professionals and have a pretty good understanding of how, trauma can have a really deep impact on the brain. And I think the common phrase that I've heard brought up is like the intensity, the frequency, and the duration. And obviously, caregiving falls under a lot of those categories.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Right. So from what you have seen, what ways should we be treating caregiver brains with more compassion? Being able to do these kind of things to prep for intense periods where there's probably not necessarily anything wrong with your brain, but you're under so much stress that you should kind of treat your executive functioning or, things a little bit differently.
I think that we are under stress, and stress does play a negative part in our brain. Too much stress, right? Absolutely. We're talking about physical, emotional, and mental stress, right? Taking care of somebody else, especially in a state of, maybe they have medical needs and cares, medication, things like that. And that's not a burden, but definitely an extra set of things that we need to take care of, right? So it adds to our stress. But when we think about, I consider it maybe the caregiver brain of phenomena, the stress that we're under on a daily basis really leads to extra cortisol within our system. And studies have shown that the extra cortisol over a prolonged period of time really has an impact on our memory. Like here, we're trying to be the second stopgap, so the people that we're taking care of may have memory loss, but it impacts our memory as well, and it impacts our hippocampus, which
Mhm.
is the home of our executive functioning. So we need to be critically aware of prolonged stress over a long period of time does actually have an impact on our own brains.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I constantly see that in a lot of caregivers, the like self-shaming or guilting yourself over, oh, I forgot this, I should have remembered this, or different things. And so I think, it's just really important to remember to have that compassion and, like you said, to kind of put some things in place to change so that you're not dealing with the fallout of forgetting or, the different things that happen.
Absolutely. And especially when our executive functions are, when our, the caregiver's executive functions are impacted over prolonged stress or a very stressful event that has taken place, it makes it harder for us to plan. It makes it harder for
Right.
us to prioritize and also to regulate our own emotions.
Exactly.
So it makes it, the act of caregiving even more difficult. And it turns like that increased stress creates a real negative feedback loop that can lead to critical burnout.
Right. Well, and that's one stat that I will bring up quite often that I hear that I don't remember if we talked about this one in particular, but that in cases where a spouse is taking care of someone with dementia, they're more likely to die before the person with dementia because of the emotional stress that it causes, right? And I think a lot of that does come from what's going on in your mind. And if your mind starts to give up, then that's when all the other things follow. So I think that's what I like about what you're talking about is, okay, let's, figure out ways to help that and not get you to the point of
Yeah,
being so stressed out, right?
absolutely. We're actually acting in a lot of cases as the prefrontal cortex, right? The
Right.
CEO or the air traffic controller of the brain for the people that we're caring for. So there
Exactly.
are several strategies that we could possibly put in place to not only help them, but also have a more positive impact on how we show up as care providers.
Right. So what would be kind of your top strategies you would recommend to people? I know it might be hard to number it down to just a
I can
few,
think of
but yeah.
four off the top of my head.
Yeah.
One would be a family calendar, all right,
Mm,
an external family calendar. In the day of digital right now, we tend to do a lot of things online and they're not concrete, they're not in front of us. And oftentimes it seems more packed than it actually is. So having a calendar that not only are, the people that we're caring for can look at, but it can be posted on the refrigerator. Other people that are also taking care or a part of the care plan or team can also look at it as well. So I think
sure.
externalizing that and getting it on paper is really important. We don't have to hold all that in our brain, which could
Okay.
lead to overload, right? Stop trying to remember all those,
Yeah.
appointments and pills and medications and eating times. Put it on paper and that'll really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people underestimate how good it can do. And I will also emphasize like finding what works for you because for some people they swear by their Google Calendar or their Apple Calendar or whatever. Other people they have to carry around the big old planner with them or maybe it's literally just a notepad. So, I think I had to go through a period of time where I probably used a million different task planners and project planners and different things. And so
What
I
did you
think
settle on? What did you finally decide was good for your brain?
the best thing for me is to do time wise to block out my Google Calendar. Like I follow that religiously to make sure I get to appointments and etc. To-do list, I have tried so many different Asana, Trello, lots of different things. Pen and paper is still the thing that is most effective for me. And I even got to the point of figuring out that, and this will probably sound crazy to say, but even lined paper or dotted paper like feels too much. So the easiest thing for me to do is to get just a blank piece of computer paper and just write like brain dump everything I need to do and then try to organize by okay, this has to be done today. This has to be done Friday, right? Like putting time deadlines on things. And I think, sometimes even focusing on what are things I can take off of my list. Like what can wait until tomorrow can be really helpful too, right?
That's one of the strategies I was definitely going to share with you
Yeah,
is to give yourself the grace to know that when you're overwhelmed, it all doesn't have to get done. Pick out the
exactly.
low hanging fruit on your list, right? And set it aside. Maybe it's the laundry, right?
Exactly.
That can wait. Maybe it's, raking the backyard, whatever it is, that low hanging fruit that doesn't necessarily have to be done right now. And there's a way to actually organize that through the Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if you've
Mm,
ever heard of that
I've not heard of
before.
that one.
So what I think that the premise was what President Eisenhower came up with this, when he was in office, and
Sure.
it's a grid, a 4 grid plan. What's urgent, what goes urgent, what can be set to later, what can be delegated, and what can be just
Sure.
put off and not necessarily done. So you can look it up online, Eisenhower Matrix, but it's a good way to prioritize what needs to happen now and
Mm.
what can be delegated or really put off until you have that extra time.
Well, and that's part of what I was going to say too. So it's interesting, it includes delegation, is that I feel like a lot of people will bring up, oh, they always say, let me know how I can help, and I don't know what to do. Well, then literally sit down and brainstorm what are the 10 things you need to get done and give them 2 of them, right? So if it is that the dishes are bothering you, tell them you can come do a load of dishes.
That's fantastic. You know what? Add that to the list. That's a really good one because when people do reach out and say, "Hey, how can I help?" When we're talking about that, let's think about it as a metacognitive rest for us. We're letting our brain kind of offload, and if someone is offering to help, let them.
Right.
Right? Let them come in, and if it's the dishes, let them do the dishes.
Right. Well, and I think people get so embarrassed if they ask you to clean up, or you like feel bad, like, I don't really want you to do my laundry. That's embarrassing, right? But I think the thing to remember is like everybody has had a day when their house was a complete nightmare. Like everyone has had a day when their dishes have piled up so much, or maybe you even just threw a dish away because you're like, well, can't save this. It's too dirty, right? So I think just knowing that everybody has those moments, and so you'd much rather let somebody in and form that connection, especially because I'll say the other most common thing I hear is that people feel like they lose relationships and friendships when going through caregiving spells, right? So I think allowing people in is the only combat to those problems, right? Like
Yeah, that's
building
beautiful.
relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. When people do try to show up, oftentimes like you said, your calendar is blocked. And oftentimes those blocks, right, get taken up with whether it's traveling to and from or, checking
Exactly.
in on. And oftentimes we don't schedule in the time to regenerate our own self, right? In order to take that,
Right.
another strategy would be, that time that we need to sit back and take 10 or 15 minutes to think about the positive things that are happening in our life or how we can refresh ourselves, whether it's through meditation or
Mm,
spiritual way or even just going for a walk in nature. They said research
yeah.
shows that that's one of the most important things as well.
Especially when there's sunshine out, I feel like there's nothing that is more calming for your nervous system than to spend some time outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in
Yeah.
nature. Get your feet in the grass.
Literally grounding yourself. And I know that's where some therapists will even recommend doing the like breathing techniques or focusing on what can you hear, what can you see, what can you feel, right? Like those are different ways to kind of give your brain a break for a second so it's not constantly on, right?
I actually do practice that. I'll sit on the porch and just be really silent and think of 10 things I can hear in that moment. And it takes a lot longer. Usually 1 through 5 is pretty easy, whether it's
Sure.
an engine of a car or, a bird. And usually 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are really difficult. And it's almost like you can hear maybe uh, I don't know, an AC click on in a
hmm
neighborhood or a dog barking way off in the distance. But it's interesting when you do actually clear the clutter and are mindful for just a short period of time, we reconnect with ourselves and it doesn't seem life doesn't seem so frenetic or so panicked in that moment.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, that self-care is really important.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I know that was one of your recommendations was the scheduling. What would you say are some of your other recommendations to help people?
I think that we make so many decisions during the day. I call it the decision fatigue tax,
Sure.
right? We're not just making, again, decisions for ourselves, but for our families and for the people that we take care of. And we could feel absolutely depleted.
Mm,
Well, like now we have 2 separate brains, right? We're trying to maybe guess what somebody we're taking care of, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what their needs are. And again, I would suggest that you ask. Right?
mm,
Oftentimes, the ask is often bigger than maybe we can provide, but at
sure.
least you're tapping into what they say they need, and it's really giving them autonomy again because in a care providing role we somehow take over that autonomy for the people that we care.
Right, right. And so I guess when you're saying asking, what would be examples of ways to give them that choice back on things that we could kind of prioritize?
I would say, like, somebody would say, like, what's on your list to do today? Or like they ask you to solve a problem for them,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Brainstorming and
mm.
asking them to come up with ways to brainstorm, right? How would you solve that problem? So, say for instance, they come to you with a problem and you could, whether it's they've lost something or they have
I
an
think the
appointment.
example you gave too is like thinking of words, right? Like, what's the word for this?
Exactly.
Yeah,
We actually, because we take on all that information, we're taking on that load, that cognitive load, that sometimes we don't even let them finish a sentence
right.
because whether we're in a hurry or we're in a heightened state, we're short on time, short on energy, short on patience, whatever that looks like. But allowing them to search for the word or to problem solve or critically think, that actually is engaging their brain.
Hmm.
Again, giving them autonomy to problem solve. Now, whether you go with that particular how they rationalized it, but you've just created a brain gym, and the brain
Right.
gym is allowing them to think beyond the walls, right, of their everyday life and come up with strategies. Like, how would you
Hmm.
handle that, mom, if that was your situation? Or dad, how do you think you're going to get to your appointment on Tuesday? Right. And playing those mental gymnastics. And at the end of the day, well, I'll probably end up driving him anyway.
Sure.
I'm going to go through that because that's really important. That's critical thinking and problem solving that has gotten my dad to almost 90 years of age. He was
Right.
very good at that. But taking that autonomy away from him and telling him what I'm going to do, this is what you're going to do today, and this is how we're going to do it, I think takes away that mental load for him and it puts it on myself or a care provider. Let him own it.
Right. Or like I know, for example, that food can be another one that people get picky about, right? Like maybe doctor says they need to have one diet and they are completely opposed to it, want to eat another way, right? But I think that can be another way to kind of, empower somebody to make decisions and give them parameters. And, I think one of the exercises I remember doing in school before when we were talking about how the brain works with creativity is that sometimes constructive walls, like you're even saying, putting limits on it, saying, okay, you can have anything you want. What vegetable do you want, right? Like, I'll get you any vegetable. Limiting it a little bit, but still making it about a choice, can be better than just open ended because maybe too many options on the flip side is
Yeah,
overwhelming, right? Like, I
absolutely.
can have anything for dinner. I don't know what I want. Okay, but if you give me two choices, I'm going to be much easier to get you to, to get you an answer than to just
Yeah.
say you can have anything.
I think that's really important. Obviously, you have to understand like who you're caring for, right?
Exactly.
And what that looks like. But I think that's a great idea, right? You're giving them a choice, still able to actualize and to have some autonomy, but providing choices within reason and
Exactly.
within the parameters that you're able to show up for. So, 6:30 at night, if my dad's asking for pineapple,
Yeah.
I may have to make a run for the store.
Right, right. So, but it, and it does come at moments, not saying that that's going to be true of every single moment that perfectly it's going to work out that way, but, if you have the time, when you have the time to be able to present those options, like you said, if you're running out of the door and need to run to the doctor, it might not be the time to be practicing this,
Yeah.
letting them to fill in the blanks and not doing everything for them. But I think, part of it could even just come with, like we kind of discussed last time, understanding that you're going to have to take more time to get to the doctor. So, making time for that could decrease your stress. So I think some of it is even knowing the person and what matters to them. So if your goal is to decrease your stress, you might have to spend more time doing it. If your thing is that you don't have as much time and you're going to be a little bit stressed out afterwards, maybe you just need to build more decompression time into your day, right? To chill afterwards because you just got to bite the bullet and get it done.
I think it's easy. It's easy to stand back and come up with these, suggestions. In the moment, I think you need a toolkit. You need
Totally.
several things that you can pull from and that are at the ready. And one thing I'd like to do too to increase working memory
Mm,
is, to give three-step directions. Like if you think about even when a child is growing, their prefrontal brain is growing,
sure.
one of the goals that we give them is to follow directions and steps. And we
Hmm.
typically don't right off the bat give them three things you need to do, right? Go upstairs, brush your teeth, and get dressed, right?
Right.
They have to build on those, right? And just as when our brain is in dealing with either mental or emotional, when I'm talking about not just ourselves, but the people that we care for,
Sure.
providing too many directions is a lot. So limiting the commands, or what we think the 3-step commands, or what we want them to
Sure.
accomplish, scaling them back depending on what we need. So say, for instance, I'm going to pick up my dad for an appointment at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to say, hey, Dad, get yourself up, ready, eat breakfast, make sure that you're dressed, ready to go, have your walker, blah, 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 blah.
Have your insurance card in the bag that I put it in every time. Yeah.
Cognitive overload,
Yeah.
right? So if that is something that happens routinely over time, you can go on Canva, right? Or one of these things online and create a script with images on them. Those are often takes the mental load of the working memory and puts it in a contextual form, a concrete contextual form that they just have to look at all the things that they need before they walk out the door. It helps us. It takes that mental load off of us. Of course, we need to check it before, they sit in the car and we're off and running. But again, it's giving them some responsibility, but it's also helping us at the end. And we're creating a map for them that they're able to access that working memory a little bit easier than a whole list of verbal commands.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think even just having an understanding of how their memory will go over time helps a lot, like understanding. And so I think that's some of what I would love to hear from you as well too, because I think some people don't understand how that changes over time. So trying to get them to remember to grab the red bag from the bowl every single time, well, the situational memory, like the situational awareness, might not be there, right? Versus if it's words or different things. So what kind of overall, kind of insight can you give into that?
Talk about, it's called neural pruning. And our brain can't remember all the information, our lived experiences, phone numbers, addresses, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Even PIN numbers, right? So what happens with our brain is it actually scales back. Think of a shrub, right? And we prune it in order that it stays healthy, right? And we don't have all these offshoots. So sometimes we dismiss information that seems trivial, that we haven't used in a while. And that could be, if you think about it, maybe you took Spanish while you were in school, or took a language while you were in school. If you don't use it regularly, that's something that might get pruned, right? As something that you don't necessarily need to recall right away. So our memory does dissipate over time. But if we think about kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Sure.
We need to eat. We need to be safe, right? We need to make sure that we have loving relationships. Those are things that are what are going to keep our brain safe. And those are the things that are top of mind. Mm-hmm. So remembering the insurance card that's in the wallet, in the back of the bag, may not be front of mind when we look at the things that are keeping individuals alive, healthy, and able to show up. So take that into consideration, especially, they're battling, they're at that point in time, all that force to keep them up and healthy as they can be in that moment, is really going to nourishing their body, and their brain sometimes may not get the benefit of, the nutrients that they're eating, or some of the other things that they're doing, the vitamins that they're taking. So we have to be cognizant that, this is a decline over time. Mm-hmm. We're all declining over time.
Exactly.
Understanding the grace and, putting ourselves in that position, especially when it comes to attitude and behavior, showing up in a way that we would like someone to show up for us.
Right. Well, and I was going to say, I see that particular instance happen a lot when I've been in memory care units in particular, where everybody there is constantly, like, the one question they want to ask is, what time is dinner? And it could be 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're still asking when they're going to have food next, right? And I think it's easy for people to get annoyed and to be like, it's 10 o'clock, dinner's at 5. What else do you want, right? But I think, to your point, it's, what is constantly being brought up? What are the points of conversation? What are the things that they have to look forward to? And so being able to build in those familiar touch points and reminding their brain of things. And so for individuals in a nursing home that may not have people visiting them often, if dinner time is their happy part of the day, that's what they're going to be looking forward to, right? So that's what their brain is kind of looking for, to seek that happiness and the joy that they get from dinner time, right? And so being able to build more activities into somebody's daily regimen can be really important, which I think was another thing that you kind of brought up previously as well, is how to kind of go outside of the normal conversations, talk about things going on in your life when you call your loved one up, right? Go beyond just the weather and what you had for dinner, you know?
I think we talked about my dad during COVID. We noticed there was a decline in his speech because he was
Yeah.
living alone, and subsequently, although we would talk to him, he has 4 children, including myself. We'd all talk to him at stages during the week or maybe on the
Right.
weekend, but it wasn't enough to really insert different verbiage into his conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, we made it our mission in order to change that to Zoom with him once a week, a Zoom call so he could actually see us. I
Right.
think that's important. Not everybody can do that, and I understand that.
Absolutely.
However, I do think, oftentimes when you go to a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility, you see individuals wrapped around a TV screen,
Yeah.
right? Because they're hearing information and that auditory input, right? We perseverate. Oftentimes the brain will focus on things. If you think about it, you've probably thought about the same 6 or 7 things day after day after day. Our
Right.
brain loves routine. And subsequently, when our brain starts to diminish, our world gets smaller because we are in a facility or we're unable to leave our home. We need things that actually engage our brain on a different way. So whether that's music, whether that's the sound of grandchildren, right? If somebody can tape that and play it in the background of them laughing, having a good
Absolutely.
time, anything that can actually intercept what those thoughts are on a daily basis, like inputting something else into the equation is really helpful to keep the brain stimulated. And the point is, we're trying to create a happy atmosphere within the brain, I would think, because lack of better words, because oftentimes we travel those roads or we look at those thought patterns that aren't very productive or maybe
Right.
not be very positive. And when we can insert as a caregiver, insert those kind of happy things into somebody's life, I think it's really important. I think I know it brings me joy at the end of the day to be able to do that. And I would like to think that it maybe bring other people. But when you see somebody smile because of a memory or because they're able to see a child or, pet a dog with pet therapy or something like that, it definitely
Yeah.
helps more than the external. It really helps our brain.
And I think that's the reminder to take away here, is to not feel like we're suggesting to add something crazy to everything that you're already doing, right? Like everything you listed could be so simple, like sending the videos of your kids, if they have a fun moment, or, I've seen some really touching videos lately of people that were planning their wedding and knew that grandma couldn't leave nursing home, and so they take the wedding dress to her after the wedding and like dress up for her to see them, right? So maybe when you do that, you still bring the recording of your wedding day with you too, to be able to show them and send it to them so they could rewatch it later if they wanted to,
Yeah,
right? So I think these are things that you can be doing just the same as you would do for a long distance friend. I think technology is getting there, but I would also say that there's some really good CNAs or nurses or doctors that want to be able to help your loved one too and be able to show them things, especially because as somebody progresses and gets to the point where behaviorally they can be a little bit challenging to work with, being able to have those kind of things that have built a relationship with a person, I'm sure can go a long way to help with some things. I know behaviorally people get to a point where it's a very complex situation.
yeah,
So not trying to say this will absolutely fix
yeah,
everything, but these kind of things I think can help, if nothing else, bring you comfort as well too, to be able to see and have these memories with them
yeah.
as well.
I agree. My father, I didn't purchase it for him, but somebody with him in my family did. He has a picture frame that we load it from afar. Have
Yeah.
you seen that? You're nodding your head.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love those. I think they're so fun.
yeah, and we're able to say, "Hey, I sent you some videos, or I sent you some frame like pictures. Can you check your frame when you get a chance?"
Yeah,
And he loves it. He absolutely loves it, and it keeps him in touch with what's happening in the family.
absolutely.
Yeah, maybe a grandchild's football game or, a celebration that, he was unable to attend, but he's actually seeing it in real time. And I've noted that my father is less likely to go out. He likes the
Mm,
confines of his home. He likes to feel safe and he likes for people to come into his home to be with him.
Sure.
However, he's less likely to leave. So if we can print stuff in there, we have pictures of the children, grandchildren. We've got the picture frame, the moving picture frame. We
Yeah,
try to do things within in an environment where he feels safe.
absolutely. No, I think that's really important as well too, is to keep it within, trying to find the happy balance between not going to be too overwhelming for you, but is still going to be helpful for them,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's a good example of something that meets in the middle. So I will even try to find one of those picture frames and link it in case if people want that, because I think that can be a really helpful tool
yeah, absolutely.
for people to be able to stay connected, in a way that's not like get on Facebook and then you're stressed out trying to help them find their Facebook password again or something, right?
I think we last time we talked too about another tool that I find really helpful. It's you can use an egg timer, but it's a thing called a time timer.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, if you're talking to mom or dad or to somebody saying, we're going to be leaving in 20 minutes. 20 minutes is very abstract. What does that
Right.
look like when you have all day, right, to get ready?
Right.
Or so it's a timer that counts back. You twist it. It's an hour long, but you twist it, and the red counts down. And that actually is a real visual cue, right? Again, it doesn't require somebody to look at a watch or to keep track and of every minute. It's a visual for them to actually say, okay, when the red clicks down, I'll get a notice or a prompt of a signal that says my time is run up. So whether you're having them wait a specific time, like wait this amount of time before you take your medication, we'll be leaving in this amount of time, or dinner is in 1 hour, the alarm, when it clicks down, that's when we're ready. I think that's
Right.
really helpful as well.
Right. Well, because I think we were talking about how, there's been too many times where you'll call, okay, I'm going to be there in 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. And then you show up and nothing has been done, right? So I think that's where that combination of being able to visually show the time, and then maybe you still have that Canva printout of the checklist of things they have to do with the pictures, even, if that's needed. I think that combination would go a lot further. And what I really like about what you're suggesting and kind of your perspective around it too is like, okay, let's understand where your brain is at and how we can work with it, and not trying to shame you or say, it's terrible that you are this way. It's just using tools to make sure that you can still function, right?
And I think actually having the language around executive function is really important, not just as a care provider, but for every human, right? What are the executive functions? What do they look like? Where are our strengths and where are our deficits? And I have a free executive function survey on my website. It was a part of my PhD program. It's absolutely free. And you can actually see where your executive functions are really high and then where you may have gaps. And you can actually do a mock one for somebody you're caring for to get a better perspective and
Mm-hmm.
understand what that looks like.
And almost even kind of compare, I guess, where yours are at, where theirs are
Yeah,
at, and kind of figure out where those gaps are to just try to be preventative so you're not in these situations so stressed out. And I'm
yeah.
sure
And putting
people have been,
words to it, right? Like being able
right,
to understand that, focus, what that looks like. Is it just
absolutely.
focus on, something that you're doing in that moment? Or is it your ability to focus on someone's eyes when they're talking to you?
Mm,
Organization, again, is not just having a clean kitchen. Organization
right,
is how you organize your thoughts, right? So having an understanding of the gamut of what executive functions cover, I think
right.
we're empowering care providers to have the understanding of the prefrontal cortex and what that looks like for the individuals that they care for.
Right. Well, it's like what I was describing with my calendar. It's one thing for me to know everything I have to do, right? It's another to know what time do I have to do it? How long does each task take?
And what to prioritize, yeah.
Right. Emotionally, is there something that's heavier for me to do on this? I think factoring in your emotional weight of the tasks you have to
Super
do
important.
is important as well, right? Which I think definitely applies to caregivers. I'm sure that there is a task you've been putting off. Maybe it's will planning, maybe it's funeral prep that you don't want to think about, right? Because that's really emotionally heavy. But being able to understand that, like you said, putting that into words so then you can adequately prepare for it, get support for it, that goes miles. That solves so many problems, right?
Yeah. And I think understanding some of these tools and using them is really a sign of strength and empowerment. It's a working in a professional way with research-backed tools that are there to really help in a really high demanding role that you are as a care provider.
Right. And so I think that's the main thing I would say too, is to just have more self-compassion and, remember to take care of yourself. Excuse me, that I like to ask people, is kind of one of our last questions on here is, what is your favorite form of self-care personally? And something that has been able to help you, because I think self-care is such an individual thing, and what works for my brain is not what's going to work for your brains. I like to ask people just to kind of give everyone that's listening an idea of forms of self-care that they can do as well. So I'd love to hear what are some ways that you take care of yourself.
Oh, that's a great question, right? I'm like now thinking, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've always been an athlete, and I think that spending time moving my body and sweating is really helpful for me. It grounds me in a way that I haven't found any other way. So whether it's a bike ride or a row, I actually row as well.
That's so fun, yeah.
Those are things that I really get into my own body flow, and I'm able to, I guess, my form of meditation. What about you, Mikayla? How do you self-care?
The sunshine is a great one for me. So honestly, even if I'm busy, if I just try to eat lunch outside, that is a good way for me to reset, even just trying to take 5 minutes. I would say moving my body is also another way that I have been trying to do that. In particular, I like hiking and being able to be, climbing mountains. And that's kind of my motivation for going to the gym, because going to the gym is not my favorite. But I tell myself, if it means I can climb a taller mountain, that's how I'm going to do that. And then I also get into baking a lot, especially just finding different recipes. And, I really like research, but I feel like being able to apply it to other hobbies, like, I want to try this complicated recipe and make my brain think a little bit, right? This is something that I had to drop, so I have a goal to get back into it this coming year, is that music was really helpful for me to be able to relax my brain, because I found that when I would play piano, like, I could just be creative, be in the moment, not have to think about things. Now, it would take me work to be able to learn these songs and to be able to practice them, but once I got to the point of knowing it and being able to be more musical with it, it would just be a good place for me to have to turn off my brain and not think about the million different things that were going on.
Beautiful. My daughter's getting married, as you said that you're preparing as well.
Yes.
I have been practicing my ukulele to be able to play a song for her. So I don't know if that's relaxing or not right now, but
well, yeah, and I think it, like I said, it goes through stages. Like, when I played the saxophone in band in high school, I would say that was not necessarily a stress reliever, and that was part of why I dropped it after when I was moving on to college, because it was such a high-strung situation. Like, the high school I went to, I didn't even do marching band, I just did concert band. They would like win state competitions, like all this crazy stuff, and I was like, I played it too much, I need a break from this, so I think that's the key sometimes too, especially if you're a very high performing perfectionistic kind of individual, is being able to keep hobbies that are truly hobbies, not that you have to be perfect at it, just doing it for the fun of it. Exactly. So that's why maybe your rowing is going to be the thing that is your stress reliever when you have to practice ukulele. So, have different things for different reasons. But thank you so much for sharing all of this today. I know you mentioned the free guide that you have, or the quiz that kind of takes you through things. I would absolutely link that. But what are some other ways for people to find more about the work you do?
I'm on YouTube, the ADHD Success Lab. And it's not just ADHD, it's more executive function.
Sure.
But individuals that have ADHD definitely have executive dysfunction. Absolutely. And I'm on social media, whether that's Facebook or Instagram, under the ADHD Success Lab, Dr. Christine Powell.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this today, because I think I love being able to hear kind of the reasoning behind things, but then also practical ways for people to consume this information and be able to apply it. So I think it will be really helpful. So I appreciate you sharing more about your experiences.
I hope it helps others.
I think it absolutely will. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this conversation today. I hope this episode reminded you of something really important. If caregiving feels mentally exhausting sometimes, it's because it is. Your brain is carrying a lot. and understanding that can help us give ourselves a little more grace along the way. A big thank you to Dr. Powell for sharing both her expertise and her personal experience. If you'd like to learn more about her work, you can find her at the ADHD Success Lab on social media and YouTube, and we'll link her executive functioning assessment in the show notes as well. And if this episode resonated with you, one of the best ways you can support the podcast is by sharing it with another caregiver who might need to hear it. You can also follow the podcast so you don't miss future conversations like this one. As always, I am really grateful that you're here. Caregiving can feel incredibly isolating sometimes, but you're not alone in this. Until next time.